And we continue learning Dirshu Mishnah Brura, continuing Hilchos Netilas Yadaim, Siman Kof Non Tes. We pick it up from Sif Yod, says the Mechaber. Emita Chavis Mlea Mayim, if you tilt over a barrel full of water, V'holach V'yashav Loi, V'chavish Shefeches Mayim Kol Yom Machvas Tatiyasei. And then the barrel, due to your tilting it, keeps on pouring out. V'notal Yadaim Mimenu, and you take the water from it, also Loi Tefillah. And this is what we referenced in the previous year, that we're now going to see how far does Koyach Gavra go. To remind yourself, there are two critical ingredients when we discuss Netilas Yadaim. We have the ingredient of a Kli, the necessity that has to come from a Kli. The reason why washing from a sink can't work. And reason number two being Koyach Gavra, it has to be the pouring of man, the strength of man. For that, we spoke out that just opening the sink multiple times, it might work, but you will not have the ingredient of a Kli. So now we're going to see over here, how far does it go that your action is considered that it's within the realm of Koyach Gavra. Says the Mishnah Brura, Sivkatan Samachei Imhita. Someone else tilted the chavis, the barrel. And when he tilted the barrel and started the water coming out, he had no mindset at all to allow this to be a preparatory action for eating. Meaning to wash your hands, it still works. Because the person washing his hands has in mind for Netila. As long as there's intent by either the one placing or the one washing his hands. It's not the same as Siftas. Says the Mishnah Brura. In Siftas we learned Koyach Gavra is only that first pour. And that's the reason why each pour you have to return it. We said by the plug, you got to put the plug in and take it back out. But what's the reason why that's only over there? There you're going to do an action in the actual water. Not says you just remove the plug to let the water come out. And that is the reason it's not considered your strength, rock. That first string that comes out when you take it out. But over here, you do something in the water itself, that you're preventing them, and via your tilting, it's causing them to come out. If I situate this barrel in a way that it's going to be continuously pouring, then it's considered I did an action in the water itself. And then every bit of water that comes out afterwards is considered that it came from my koyach. That's the reason why it will work. Also, there still is a lechatchila to be machmir. The Dirshu over here, Dirshu number 67, equates his back to Sif Zayin, Sif Ches, pouring water into a pipe, even though there also you did a maisa. We spoke about that if you pour water and then it runs down the pipe, it only comes out at the other end, that's not called Koyach Gavra. Sif Zayin. So what's the reason why over there the Dirshu points out that it's only Koyach Gavra if you put your hands right at the beginning, whereas by us the whole time it's considered Koyachai? Explains the Dirshu, you can be mechalik, you can differentiate and explain that by a barrel there's one action always, and then everything from the barrel is going in your hands. But when you pour it out, even though it's true that the water is always coming out via my action, but if I'm not close to the water, then it's considered, that makes strength. So this is Rav Mordechai Gifter's Ha'ara and Krevis Kol Taira, a beautiful lamdis. Let's just explain it one drop deeper. Again, if I take the barrel and I tilt it, then every dot that comes out of the barrel comes from me. So similarly, it's true. If I pour from the barrel into the pipe, everything pouring out of here from the barrel is mine. But if it then runs down the pipe, that's where it loses the koyach gavra, as it's at a distance and it's removed from the action of the pouring. Continue with Sif Yud Aleph, says the Mechaber Akol Kashem Litin Mayim Liyadayim. Everyone is kosher to put water in your hands. Afilu Chayr Shaita Vekatan Avigalil Venida. Vikaman Darm Dekat Bachs Ben Shisha Dina Kikoif. Anyone can pour the water in your hands. Of course, it's going to be relevant. Lil Seder. People have the minhag that the children bring the water to the father, and some people that want to even pour it on the father's hands. So we'll have a shaila. Could a child pour it on the father's hands? We'll have a shaila of anida. Not that, of course, one's wife, when she's in anida, can't pour it on the hands, but a child, a 15-year-old girl is going to have a din of anida. Can she pour it on the father's hands or a brother's hands? What about the guy? You have an elderly person and he can't wash his hands, so he wants to have the help. He wants to have an aid. It could help him do Netilas Yadaim, do any of these work. Says the Mishnah, yes, Hakol Kesherim the Netilas Yadaim. Explains the Mishnah Brura, Sivkatan Samaches, Chayre Shaita Vekatan, the Inan B'nei Das. The only ones, even, a Chayre Shaita Vekatan are included that they could do Netilas Yadaim. Even a guy or a nida after minute yadayim let shum asr al yadayim. Even though when a guy touches something or a nida, there is tama. That's not a gezer that was made when it comes to eating chulin. Some say all the water is tamei. We don't worry because Yodayim mehan, there is a lechatchila not to have the water poured from a guy or a nida. We'll see the Dirshu, note 69 in a moment. Some, the Ramah points out that under 6 years old, some say is a din of a kaif like a monkey. Says the guy, do not be machmer on this. Even a young child is yes allowed to be the one to pour the water for Netilas Yadaim. Dirshu note number 69 quotes the Chazayin Ish that says, even though the Mishnah Berurah just said says the Chazayin Ish, we don't find anyone that's machmer on this, because if you're a machmir, then one nidusha will not be able to pour water on her friend's hands, and she shouldn't even be able to pour in her own hands because she's tamei, and she should have to have her friend who's tar do Netilas Yadayim for her. We never found out. We never found any woman that when she's a nida, let someone pour the water on her, and the Rishayim say she can take it by herself. And nowadays, anyways, we're all to make Nesim, therefore it's not something to be makbid on. Of course, this Chazon Ish is a very big deal, as we pointed out, that this could be a classical case for an elderly person. He wants to have an aid, be the one to help him do the Netilas Yadayim. So from the Mishnah Berurah, it sounds like there's a lechatchila not to have a guy, but Chazon Ish is pointing out it is not a place to be machmir. Continues, the Machaber Sif Yud Beis Imakaif Pirush Min Chayan on animal. Sima Blaz Noisin Mayim Liyadayim pours water in your hands. Yish Paisav Yish Machshirim. V'Nirin Devreim Mikol Makam Yish Lachmer. Even though Nirin Devreim says the Machaber of the Yish Machshirim, Mikol Makam one should be Machmir. Now Sif Yud Gimel Lachatchila Yechavin Anoitel and Atila Machsharis Lachil. You should have in mind when you're pouring your water that you're doing it to eat. Says the Ramah. The kavanas naisein nami mayal afilu chatchil, the one who pouring it on can have kavanas enough. Afilu shalkivin anoitel klal, even if the one that's having his hands washed did not have kavana at all. Says the Mishnah Berurah Sivkatan Ayin Aleph Min Chaya the Kaif Yesh B'Ksas Das L'Tashmish. Why do we use a monkey? So the Mishnah Berurah here points out the reason being because the monkey has das, meaning that it knows what to do. You can train the monkey to pour the water. It's das tashmish. Doesn't have a proper das, but it could at least do the action. Yesh ba'islan deni kan kol kavra v'yesh machshirin zirlut labina sheva al yad of rak mikoyach noisin. So this machlekes really teaches us the depths of what is koyach gavra. Is koyach gavra merely that I need a gavra to be the one pouring it, and that's more called koyach noisin. This has to come from the source of one pouring it, or does it mean no? You need to have a das. It needs to be a cognizant action of a human being, and therefore a monkey would not work. So we have a machlekes. The Mechaber said you could be mekel, but the Ramah pointed out. Sivkatan Ayin Dalet explains the Mishnah Berurah. Ubediavad kosher. Beli Rabba kosher the gam b'diavad yachzor v'yita b'li bracha. Says Eli Rabba even b'diavad shriwash eladim in lo mayim yishtes v'chal netilas zu. If there's no water, you could be seimech. Again, I don't know how relevant it is. I don't know how many people have monkeys that are trained to pour on their hands. Sivkat in your gimel teaches lechatchila. You should have das when you are pouring it or when you're receiving the water poured on you. Sivkat and Ayin Hey says Mishtabura Magin Avram Kasad Lipsal Afid Yavid Im Loikim Nukla without Kavan's boss. Ayin Sham Avala Gra. His Kim Kasem the Loikavan is kosher. It's gonna be kosher even without Kavana. V'chein if das forever Yishayim but the Yavid Bevadi is like Kshin Lamayim Lital Shein it's Kedas Mechaber. Certainly you could be makel and not wash your hands again if you don't have any water. Chumosasi Shkeini Kosa Maimer Mordechai. Kavanas Hanaisi Sivkat and Ayin Vav Im Ayin Naisi Pachas Ben Sheish. Masha Bois give Deina Mail Kavanasa if he's a young child will not help his Kavana. We conclude with Dirshu note number 71 over here. The Chazanish is mistabek. What is the din according to the Mandarma that says that it's a problem if you don't have das that is not called koyach? Gavra says the Chazanish, what happens if you pour the water from the kli and then he puts his hand underneath it? Is that considered koyach gavra? Or only if the hands are underneath when it is being poured? Meaning, how much do we need to connect between the two? And he says it's mashma that it would be considered koyach gavra, but one should be careful. And finally, we see this halacha that one should have das, one should be cognizant of what is going on. Dirshu 72 says, what's the point? Says the Chazanish, at what point of the netila? Before the mayim leaves the kli, so that the pouring of the water is done be-das. If this is the only way one does it, meaning, the Dirshu now continues, what if the only time I use a cup to pour water in my hands is for the Netilas Yadaim for the Suda, and all other times when I go to the bathroom, when I'm in a daven, I wash without a cup? Then what's going to happen is, this would be called stam das, that by using the cup, that means I'm doing it for bread, and that is as if that's when it das, that's my mindset. That's where Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says that a stam netila is considered like you have with kavana, because while your actions are muchach, that's what you're doing. And he references the famous Chai Adam, which we've spoken about extensively in Samach, that you read Kriya Shema in the Seder HaTfilah. Of course, you're doing it to be yotze your mitzvah, even without kavana, because that's called stam das. Why else are you doing it? And with that, we'll conclude over there. So, of course, there is a lechatchila when you're washing your hands to be cognizant that you're doing it for bread, but without das, it is readily apparent that is why you were doing it, and one would be yotze.